Commission and the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. Rob, I'll just look for a thumbs up that our recording is underway. So just as a reminder before we begin, we do record and post our meetings on our YouTube channel, our Regional Connection channel, so that our public can observe our conversations and hopefully learn, just as you are, about important regional issues. So I think I know everybody, but just in case, my name is Bob Crum. I'm the Executive Director here at the Planning District Commission and the Transportation Planning Organization. So before we get started, just a couple of brief items. As you can imagine, August tends to be a vacation month, and as that would occur, our chair and vice chair are taking much needed breaks today on vacation. If you're okay with it, I can facilitate the discussions today. We wouldn't need to name an official chair. Seeing the nodding of heads, why don't we go ahead and do that? Before we go any further, though, we have some additional people at the table today. I'm really excited that Surrey County is joining our Community Advisory Committee. But what might be helpful is as we go around, could we just do a brief introduction? And I'm sorry, I'll keep talking for a little bit. A brief introduction, your name, who you represent, and then for any members that are at their first meeting, which are a couple, I think, in official capacity, might be nice just to introduce yourself with a little bit of your background. Okay, so Frank, do you want to?
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Anderson, and I'm representing Portsmouth, Virginia, and I'm also running for Portsmouth City Council.
And this was my error, just as a reminder, so that we're audible for home. And Rob, good job. He's my third baseman. Always gives me the signs back there. But if we could press the button, and it's a little funny, when it's red, you're on. Okay, so when you press it, it'll turn green and then red. Red means you're live. And then when you're done, Zakiya.
Hi, everyone. Zakiya Anderson, representing City of Portsmouth. I also professionally work as the Director of Mission Impact at YWCA Southampton Roads. Also sit on a couple of boards, Urban League, other organizations throughout the region as well. Happy to be here.
Hi, afternoon. Gary Harris. I'm here representing the City of Portsmouth, kind of a returning rep. I've been on the board here for about 5 years. Also have a nonprofit called the Center for Sustainable Communities, and glad to be back after an academic hiatus.
Excellent, excellent. Well, welcome, Catherine.
Thank you. I'm Catherine Walls, and I'm here representing Surrey County, which is out in the hinterlands of Virginia. And I hope that I can contribute in some small way to this board. I've been a resident of Surrey since I was 16, so quite a while. And I've owned and operated a real estate company in the county for 37 years. And I work closely with our historical and architectural review board, and my background is in history. I was a historian on Jamestown Island during 2007.
Great.
And I'm happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharnita.
Good afternoon. I'm Shanita Pathay, the housing administrator here for the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. So you can say I'm from all 17 jurisdictions. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Deidre Garrett, the housing specialist here with the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission. And like Shanita, I'm from all 17 jurisdictions.
John Mahaley here. Nice to be here from HRTPO, and I'm a transportation plan. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matt Kleppeyes. I'm the new HRPDC and HRTPO communications administrator. Spent some time at the Virginia Aquarium, Busch Gardens, and with the United States Navy DoD. So grateful to be here. Look forward to working with you.
And just as quick background, we have taken one position and made two positions out of it. Matt's going to be focusing on communications administration. We also are currently recruiting our diversity, equity, and inclusion liaison, which will be managing our Title VI and civil rights work as an organization as well. So you'll get to know both of those positions. Anthony?
Anthony Piglowski. I am here for Suffolk. Professionally, I'm a wealth advisor with Freedom Street Partners, and this is my second meeting, so still getting to know everybody, but I'm excited to be here.
Scott McFarland, been with the, well, it was called CTAC. No, it's CTAC now. CAC.
CAC now, was
Yeah, well,
CTAC though. Yeah.
since 2016, been a member and representing Virginia Beach.
Hi, I'm Waverly Woods, and I represent Virginia Beach. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jim Bowie, and I'm represent the city of Hampton.
Hi, and I'm John Kish, representing Chesapeake.
And I'm Cecil Jenkins, representing the city of Chesapeake also.
Good afternoon, I'm Pavitra Parthasarathi, and with the HRTPO.
Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for those quick introductions. So first, we do have to go through some preliminary items on our agenda. First off, we received no public comments submitted in advance of today's meeting, but I just wanted to pause and do a call to see if anybody had anything they wanted to address our community advisory committee. Okay, seeing none, let's close that section and move on to our summary minutes. Just in terms of housekeeping items, we do have summary meeting minutes of our last two meetings, and we would ask action by the Community Advisory Committee to approve the summary minutes of those two meetings. We could do that with one motion, second, and action. Motion made by Mr. Dewey. Was there a second? Yes, sir. Mr. Jenkins, thank you. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So you've already met our new CAC member. Why don't we run through the agenda real quick so you know what to expect, and then we'll see if there's any recommendations to change the agenda. So we had received a request from our CAC member, thank you, Mr. Kish, and in fact others, to have some conversation about this regional housing situation that we're all seeing and some of the uniqueness in the housing market today. And we thought to begin by understanding what you might be able to do to understand that, it would first be important to have some background information of how we're structured as a region around housing, who's managing what programs are available, what their strengths are, sort of a structural conversation, if you will. So the two smartest people I know on that, Shanita and Deidre, are going to kick us off in a little bit, and they'll give us a briefing on that conversation. So we really look forward to that. We're going to follow that up with a briefing from John Mahaley. We are getting ready to get into a process where we have some money to allocate as a region for transportation projects. It's called RSTP money and CMAP money. John's going to tell you a little more about those acronyms. But this is the time John will talk to you about. He's calling for projects to be considered for funding by September the 1st. And if there are any pressing areas that you think maybe need our attention, this would be a great time to provide that input. So we're looking forward to that conversation. And then finally, I'll be going last today. But what I'd like to discuss with you is our pending regional legislative agenda. As a planning district commission and as a TPO, we adopt every year regional legislative priorities that we advocate to the General Assembly and in fact our federal delegation to try to move progress for our region. So I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what we did last year, what looks like is lining up to be in our agenda this year, and then get your input on what we might be missing or what input you want to give to that framework. We started that process just this morning with a presentation to our Hampton Roads Caucus members over here at the Chesapeake Medical Center. So that is what we envision for today's agenda. Any revisions or changes to the agenda? Does that sound like a reasonable path forward? Okay. So Shanita, why don't I turn it over to you and have you kick this off. We're going to call up Shanita's PowerPoint. Again, I think that we're approaching this with to understand a problem or an opportunity, it starts with understanding how we're structured, and how we're set up to address housing. And that's what I've asked Sharnita, Deidre's support to do today. So Sharnita, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, and I'm sorry, I have to brag just one sec. So I'm in front of the Hampton Roads Caucus this morning. And, it's interesting when you're in front of 20 members of the General Assembly. When we were done, one of them raised their hand. We had a delegate specifically call out Sharnita and Deidre for their excellent work on housing and helping people with their first-time home buyers assistance program and getting them into housing units. I can tell you, I go to a lot of caucus meetings. That doesn't always happen. So Deidre and Sharnita, I just wanted to officially thank you for your work. And it doesn't go unnoticed. And so we'll talk more about that today, but I just want to start on that note. So Sharnita,
Thank
sorry, I
you.
won't interrupt again.
No problem, no problem. Thank you, Bob. And in the absence of our chair, I'm just glad to be here today. This is the first opportunity I've had to present to you all. And one of the focus goals that Bob and I discussed with this fiscal period is doing a little bit more education, a little bit more of these type of overviews. A lot of times our programs are humanistically related in terms of we are a direct touch point to clients. So it's a lot different than the other topics and programs that you may hear from the Planning District Commission. So we always say we're the undercover ones. We're kind of in the trenches. We're doing the work directly with clients per se. And some of our work doesn't actually bubble up. So this year we're going to make an intentional decision to do a little bit more public outreach to our other committees to ensure that our transportation committees and our other joint committees are a little bit more familiar with housing. So for today's discussion, and I'm really informal and I really want to hear from you all and have a rich, impactful discussion about what you all are seeing. But I want to start off by giving you all a brief overview of our Regional Housing and Human Services Department and program here, talk about a glimpse of what the current housing market is looking like, and give you a little bit backstory about what we see maybe on the horizon as it relates to housing and how we need to be a little bit more intentional in terms of looking at other disciplines such as transportation, health, housing altogether as we look at our communities. So with our program, we're kind of spread out over a couple of different divisions. The main focal point of most of our work is that we are the administrator of home funds for our regional loan program. And this is a HUD program that provides down payment and closing cost assistance to residents that are low and moderately income in the area. We also serve on several boards and commissions and committees as it relates to housing and human services needs. We handle persons with disabilities. We staff support the Hampton Roads Disability Board, the Senior Services Board. I served with Cecil Jenkins for years, so we had to catch up on those times when we were on the board. I'm still there, Cecil, so you oh my God, you can come back anytime. We work with a lot of vulnerable populations in making sure that they have services and programs, and if there's any ways that we can work collaboratively over different in terms of a region, we look at that approach. And we also staff support the Hampton Roads Housing Consortium, and I'll give you a little bit more information about that. So in terms of the down payment and closing cost assistance program, this is a program, again, for low and moderate income first-time home buyers in our region. It is a forgivable, we call it a forgivable loan, but it is actually a grant. And it's contingent that the buyer actually stays in the home for a set period of time. And the reason we say loan is we are making sure that we're protecting affordability. So the buyer must stay in the home at least 5 years. On their 5th year, the loan is considered free and forgiven, and that is their equity for them. We also cover a large portion of the closing cost fees associated with those loans. And that really gives them a lot more affordability. In most cases, most of the buyers we see may be able to save for the down payment, but they're unable to come out of pocket for over $10,000 to $15,000 in closing costs. So our funds are utilized for that purpose. These are our service areas. We currently service Chesapeake, Portsmouth, Isle of Wight County, Smithfield, James City County, Gloucester, Poquoson, York County, Williamsburg, and we also joint cover Surrey and Gloucester because they're actually, Surrey has a different program and Gloucester is in two different jurisdictions with their down payment assistance program through Habitat. These are the other service areas. If you did not see your city and you were wondering what's going on in terms of your locality, Norfolk, Suffolk, Newport News, and Hampton are directly funded by HUD for their down payment and closing costs program. So any clients that we have or we run across, we refer them back to those departments. The only city that's not up there is Virginia Beach. They use their home funds for owner rehab, and they discontinued their program about 10 years for down payment. In their needs assessment, they saw that their older conditions with their properties in Virginia Beach needed more attention. So their attention is on preservation of the housing stock that they currently have in the area. So I say all of that, and you say, who are these clients? Because this has been the most impactful way of really showing what the program is designed to do. So I gave you a snapshot. These are 3 actual clients. We changed, of course, we changed the pictures, but we wanted to give you a snapshot of what the program actually entails. So the first client is a Chesapeake buyer. Couple, 2 children, both work for a large retail store locally, and we were able to assist them with their purchase. So when you're looking at a Chesapeake buyer, family of 4, they cannot make more than approximately $74,000 per year. The next example is a 21-year-old buyer. I think that was probably one of our most favorite clients. Out of shipbuilders apprenticeship program, really doing what he needed to do. We did turn into a mother for a little bit about his spending and things of that nature, but he quickly got into place and he was able to purchase his first home at 21 years old. Not only was that a success, he went back to his first cousin, which was the same age, told him about the program. So now you have 2 21-year-olds in their home. And the funniest thing is when he was really spending, he was a little bit out there. And I said to him, do you want to stay in your parents' basement longer? And he says, no, ma'am. So he quickly got himself together, stopped his spending, did everything we asked. And we were very proud that he was able to go ahead and purchase his home. The next one is a Williamsburg, York County resident. She was a York County bus driver, raising her own grandchildren, and she was able to purchase at the age of 65 years old. So we thought that was a huge success. For a household of 2, they can't make more than about $59,000. So that would give you an idea of what you're looking at in terms of affordability. So and I'll tell you the last story. We just had another lady close Tuesday and was very emotional. Her son passed away, left her 2 children to raise. She didn't have an adequate home and decided to do home ownership. So we closed with her Tuesday in York County again, and it was exciting. We really came together at the end. We worked with the mortgage company, we worked with her real estate agent, and she was able to find an adequate home for her 2 grandchildren that she just got. It's just the last couple of months have been difficult for her, but we were glad that we were able to assist her. So this kind of gives you a snapshot of the type of clients that you see. You hear the word affordable all the time. A lot of people, they kind of tense up when you say we need more affordable housing. You look at the word workforce housing is what we look at. These are your workforce. These are the people that are out driving your children to school, working on the ships, working at Walmart, working at Target. The people that you see in your churches, the people that you see as your school teachers are typically the clients that we serve with this particular program. We were awarded an additional $4 million from the Virginia Housing this year. This is an added program that we decided to bring on to help with the cost of mortgages. As you all know from the news, you've seen that the real estate market has been hot. We assumed that COVID was going to slow things down, but we actually saw the opposite in terms of where we saw home sales are going. So we wrote a grant to receive $4 million in what is called interest rate reduction funds. And what this allows us to do is to buy the interest rate down a whole percentage from what the market is, so you can see that the rate has changed since our flyer went out. But for this particular example, the fixed rate was about 3.325. And with our program, we were able to reduce the interest rate down to 2.25. Today's rate is running about 4.875, which we still hear people saying it's increased, but it's still traditionally very low if you look over the years in terms of the interest rate. But that 1% interest rate really makes a difference with our clients in order to be able to afford a home and to actually be marketable when they are writing a contract. This particular grant allocation we wrote is to increase homeownership for minority buyers in Hampton Roads. The Virginia Housing Spark program was looking for partners that wanted to work on closing the wealth gap for minorities in different regions. Hampton Roads was noted that the African American and Hispanic homeownership numbers continue to decline, and we're not where they needed to be. So this interest rate reduction is allowing us to try to target that. If you have not read the report, I can send you a link that the Virginia Association of Realtors put out that gave a huge snapshot on the minority wealth gap and how home ownership is a real key component to lessening the gap in terms of home ownership and wealth. So what are we seeing in the market? And I think Mr. Frank here could attest to what he has seen in the market when he's on there. Multiple offers on one particular home. We see a lot of investor activity, contracts ratifying over the appraised amount or the asking amount. Sellers are giving no concessions in terms of paying closing costs. Most home inspections are just for informational purposes only. And we still, at this point, have an eviction moratorium that's over as of June 30th. So we're kind of cautiously quiet. We're trying to see what is actually going to happen. Over the last month or so, our contracts have increased. We think the market is cooling a bit. We're having some of our clients able to compete a little bit more than we saw probably the last quarter of fiscal period 22. So that's kind of what we have been seeing, which has made a little bit of a challenge of getting our first time home buyers qualified and into a home. The other part of our task here is that we staff support the Hampton Roads Housing Consortium. And I know I'm giving you a lot of information and we're going to stop, and I really want to have a robust conversation and answer any questions. But we also staff support the Hampton Roads Housing Consortium. It's 90 member agencies that comprise over the entire region. It's a combination of government agencies, our public housing authorities, our nonprofit partners, our for-profit partners in terms of real estate agents, lenders. We have Wavy 10 that has decided to join us. We have a couple of our hospitals that are on there because we're seeing that we need more people around the table to address the needs of housing. So we're able to really hone in on making sure that we're looking at all areas when we look at what housing looks like in the region. And it's a separate 501c3, and it's a 12-member board of directors that represent this organization. We cover the 17 cities, and most of the time we have all representation of all of our counties and our cities on here. We do a lot of networking, a lot of exchanging of information. And what we have seen in this group is that it's really a tight-knit group that we're able to serve more clients. We're able to really ping upon each other as it relates to information that we need. And we're able to share information. And what we're seeing, if you look in the news and you look on TV, most of your predatory lenders, they have a multi-million-dollar budget. They're able to get out in front of our clients. They're able to sell theirs. But when you have great intentional programs and nonprofit work, it's very hard to get the word out. So that group has been synonymous with doing that on the ground. I want to talk a little bit about an additional grant that we are working on currently. It was a grant in conjunction with Virginia Housing and the Virginia Association of Planning District Commissions. And the grant was designed to create more affordable housing units in the region. All 21 planning district commissions were awarded. We were awarded $3 million. And the purpose of that $3 million is to gap fund projects that were going on in the region that needed a little bit more to close or to come to completion. Because of the increase in construction costs, we had quite a few projects that, because of lumber, because of staffing issues, they needed a small amount to be able to close the gap. So we have 9 proposed projects throughout the Hampton Roads region that we will be assisting with this initiative. So the initiative's focus was to look at primarily regional approaches to housing projects and planning and development to enhance relationships between regional organizations in our localities and local organizations, and to strengthen the capacity of housing opportunities. There is the Virginia Housing Strategic Plan Opportunity 2024 that you can find on the website that gave specific initiatives and concerns throughout the state of Virginia, and looking at how we create more affordable housing as it relates to home ownership and rental. So we will be releasing the 9 projects probably by September that we will be working on. And a lot of people looked at 3 million and said, wow, that's a lot. But when you look across an entire region with multiple projects, it's a drop in the bucket, but it was able to at least be impactful with creating some more units. So we're proud to kind of do that work in those communities. So here's where I need your help in terms of the current housing climate in Hampton Roads. I can tell you a little bit about what we see in terms of post-COVID or pre-COVID or where we are. It seems like we keep going back into the loop, but we continue to see a rise in home values. We're not quite sure what that's going to look like not long term as the numbers continue to climb. We're looking at astronomical increases in rental units. We were just in a conversation about what rental units were going for a couple of years ago, and we're looking at 2,700 and really high numbers in terms of that. And if you go down the street, you see an apartment complex going up. Like every 5 minutes, every street, there's a new unit, and the lease up percentages are high. They're finding the tenants that are willing to pay these numbers. We don't know what that means. We're trying to figure out what that looks like. So that's something that we are really trying to pay attention to. June 30th was the end of the evictions moratorium. Landlords are moving forward with evictions and terminating leases. Before the pandemic, there were 5 cities locally that were that kind of stood up in terms of high eviction rates. So those cities are still in need of looking at long-term plans and long-term solutions. Department of Housing and Community Development has released a grant called VERP, which is the Virginia Emergency Relief Program for evictions. And that is supposed to assist locally with finding the funding to assist clients that are in danger of losing their housing. That is something we're looking at as well. And what we noticed over the last couple of years is that quite a few people have been looking at affordable housing in a different lens. We have heard from parents saying, my son is home from school. He did his 4 years. He's a graduate, but he can't afford to leave. We've had a lot of instances that there are families doubling up. You have 2 families living in hotels, 2 families living in one unit because of the affordability. The other issue is how do we connect clients with services? And how do we get them the help needed? Sometimes it's just not knowing where to go. And what we see is that we have to look at it in a regional perspective. If we fix things in Chesapeake and you don't fix it in another city, it's not going to be impactful. And if I go back to even the example of the clients that we served, we can tell you that our Chesapeake clients work in Virginia Beach. The Portsmouth client actually lives in Portsmouth, but he's in Newport News Shipbuilding. And the other bus driver is working in York County, but she lives in Williamsburg. So we know connectivity between localities have to be key, because if not, things are not going to, they're not going to be able to fix one area and not the other. So that's something that we really wanted to talk to you all and get some feedback from you all about that. One thing that we're doing, and we're really at the infancy stage, is that we're looking at what a regional housing plan looks like. We've done a lot of brainstorming internally. I coined this term, what is adequate housing for all? You know, we don't want to say affordable, we don't want to say workforce, but what's adequate? What will be adequate for your elderly parents that are transitioning from retirement to a smaller home? How do you have housing for special needs? How do you have other housing for millennials that are coming in and going into the job force? So we're starting at infancy stages of looking at what a plan would look like. How do we get an inventory of what services and programs are out there? And how do we develop what the gap is and what we need? Hampton Roads is different from other larger metropolitan areas, so it's hard to find another area to mirror because of our transit and our waterways. But what does that look like in Hampton Roads? So that's something I wanted to hear back from you all in terms of housing is what do you all see from your jurisdictions about needs as it relates to housing? Anyone?
Gary? Gary and Waverly? I'm sorry.
First and foremost, thanks so much for doing this. I mean, this eats at the heart of what makes a community a community. Without housing and such, everything else falls apart. We work with a program called Don't Sell Grandmama's House.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And this is
Very
actually-
prevalent. Yes.
Yeah, all about making sure there's generational wealth in the family, and also that communities are maintained in a high, vibrant state because we have a high rate of home ownership, versus renting. But we also work with an initiative called the 3x30 initiative, which is getting 3 million new African Americans as homeowners by 2030 and such. And that consists of a host of people. That's the National Urban League. That's the Urban Institute. That's the National Housing Conference, the NAACP. That's the National Realtors Board. All coming together to make sure again that we're closing this abysmal gap. I mean, it's huge. We're looking at only 43% of African Americans owning their homes, versus nominally 75%. That is totally unacceptable. So there's a myriad of things that can be done and such. But first and foremost, let's make sure that we're ensuring that folks are holding on to their homes and not just giving up and accepting cash payments, which only last months, et cetera, et cetera. That they're building generational wealth, that they're building their communities based on home ownership as well.
Excellent. We partnered with NCRC about 4 years ago, and the city of Baltimore and some of those surrounding areas was working on the same project. A lot of their traditional homeowners from the 60s and 70s were offered cash. And I think I still have the card. I would like to give you that information. He was really going to family reunions and other events, just really educating people on that process. In terms of the 3 by 30, there is a pilot program going on in Richmond. Wells Fargo actually helped assist fund that project. So we're looking at partners that would be willing to do this. I asked, were they going to include other areas? But for this purpose, at this point, they're only doing the Richmond and metro area for that. But thank you for your comment.
And quickly here, in terms of evictions, Princeton University has an eviction lab where they're collecting info and research.
Yes, we reached out to them as well.
Oh, great.
When the novel came out, our chief economist, Greg Grutendorf, had reached out to them to get the data. We did find some discrepancies in some of the data, but we know overall that it needs to be something done. Most of our localities capture eviction data differently. So we're still trying to figure out what's apples, what's oranges.
but we know that there were some high pockets of evictions and illegal evictions, and have been working with the Virginia Poverty Law Center on some of that data as well.
And lastly, case management. Like you said, got to get those services in the hands of the people who need it most.
Absolutely.
That ain't happening, so. yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And unfortunately, when you look at case management and HUD counseling, they are also competing with for-profit
Right.
for-profit attorneys, for-profit agencies that are charging clients to do the same thing that we have partners that do for free. So it's an upward balance to continue to kind of educate and give that financial literacy to where they need to go.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Waverly?
Thank you very much. Well, first, I just want to say I really find the value of the dignity of giving people a sustainable job and being able to take care of their children on their own. I think it's great. I think being able to help these folks with their finances to get them in order so that they can make these purchases is absolutely critical. I wish they teach it in public school as a requirement to graduation.
They do, but it's a low,
Right.
yeah,
We need
it
to-
doesn't go into the mortgage and financing per se, but
Yeah,
there
just-
is a curriculum.
Yeah, well, they need to up that curriculum.
Absolutely.
Because some of our folks, just saying. But that said, I want to ask a couple of questions, and it's a two-part question. So one, the families that you do help buy their first homes, I think that's amazing. And how long, what's the average of that these folks stay in that residence that they've just purchased? And what's the process when they sell it? Like, is there any part of that money that comes back to the program because we helped them get that house and then their next house, they're on their own?
So generally, I think we've had one foreclosure in the 15 years that I've been managing the program.
Out of how many homes? Like
We're
a
over
million?
200 at this
Okay,
point.
okay, gotcha.
What we have found the last couple of years in terms of the market change, I'll give you it's a success story and it's not in terms of affordability. We had a young gentleman complete his 5 years. So it was a 5-year affordability period. He purchased approximately at 95,000 and he sold it at 217 in 5 years because of the market. So the equity was a success. If in fact a buyer decides to, because we run different programs, each program and city kind of runs it a little bit different. But for the most part, if a client decides to sell before their 5-year or 10-year affordability, the proceeds come back to the program.
Okay.
So it's 5-year affordability, 20% of the grant is forgiven each full year. So each year, 20% drops off, the next year, another 20%. We encourage them to stay put. So that is their equity. But if something comes up, they're leaving the area and they want to sell the property, the proceeds come back to the program, but it actually goes back to the city. The city can then determine how they want to redirect those funds back. So that's in a nutshell. If it's a 10-year affordability, 10% of that loan comes off each year. The only area that is 100% repayment back is Williamsburg, James City County. If you sell the home within that 5-year, the entire amount of the subsidy comes back to us at the close. So once they close on the house, if there is equity in there, then the proceeds come back to the program.
Got it. My next question is in regards to rental property. It's really been tough. I personally know millennials that have tried to rent apartments, and because there's so few, they're dealing with 20 and 30 applicants per listing, like per a apartment. Now, the folks that are renting the apartment, that get to run the process, they charge fees to process your application. And if you have 30 applications going in to try and rent this one apartment, that's $100 a head. And so the 29 other people that don't get the apartment, they literally pocket that $100 fee.
Yeah. So Delegate Price on the peninsula actually had a bill at General Assembly, but it was it did not go through. And they were asking for a database or for disclosure to tenants to say there is no property available before they took the application fee. But unfortunately, that bill was denied. We see the same thing. You're asking for an application fee. You already kind of know if there's any vacancies. So
Well, if they
I'm
get
not-
30 applicants,
absolutely
you're clearly not going to approve 30 applicants.
for
Why
one
are you-
unit.
Exactly.
Right.
Why are you taking that money from people that you know we've already had at least 5 to 10 others already apply? We're going to stop taking applications at this point.
Yeah, and I know that the Virginia Law Center is looking at it as well as the Legal Aid Society locally on that issue, as well as there have been landlords charging upwards to 2 and 3 months as a deposit
Yeah.
on top of first and last month. So they're
Yeah.
trying to look into the legality of that as well
Yeah.
for
it's
that.
just a
So
struggle.
I echo that. I understand. We've heard that as well.
And Trinita, if I may add to that and build on Waverly's comments, so we just learned this morning at the Hampton Roads Caucus meeting, we heard a presentation from the local realtors group, and a couple things were really caught our attention. One is right now across all housing unit types in our region, we have a housing supply at the current rate of demand of about 1.3 months of supply. The real estate industry would like that to be at 6 months of supply to have a healthy regional housing market. So that whole supply and demand you mentioned, Waverly. The other thing they talked about is, and they used one example, and Matt and I were like, wow, that's impactful. So they use as an example in a market analysis they did yesterday on a unit that rented for $1,800 a month 3 years ago. And today, as of yesterday's analysis, $2,700 is the market for that same apartment. So you add that in on top of what you said, Waverly, and just, it is. And that's why I think Trinita's comment about housing for all, it really shares light on
Well,
that.
and this, if I may interject, just to follow up on what you're saying, this particular young lady that I personally know, she didn't need assistance as far as somebody helping her get
Just to get
housing.
in.
She could afford it her own. And here's the other thing. Is the ratio fair and balanced? Like there's got to be plenty of people that don't need assistance and people that do. So are we taking more of these folks' applications than we are those that could actually afford it? Like, I'm just looking at checks and balances. Do you know what I mean? And then certainly some kind of like, hey guys, you're nailing everybody. Yeah, knock it off, right? Something. We've got to have some kind of like draw a line in the sand and then make sure that, yes, they should be able to take a percentage of fair housing clients, absolutely. But I don't want to say, oh, well, we're going to take only fair housing clients because we know we're going to get government assistance, but the people that can actually afford to pay on their own, they're out there still struggling.
Mhm. Well, we know that the majority of rental units we have in the region are market. The percentage of either income restricted or housing choice vouchers are very low. And unfortunately, with the housing choice voucher program, they're unable to find units for their clients as well. We are also looking at the state of Virginia added source of income as a protected class under fair housing. So we have been trying to educate real estate agents as well as lenders and tenant organizations and landlords that you can not deny a housing choice voucher under the protection of the fair housing. Now, have we seen some loopholes? Absolutely. But I will strongly tell you that all are suffering in terms of finding adequate housing. We have heard that the military is having a hard time even finding housing for their soldiers with their BAH and their BAQ. They're still unable to find housing close to them and housing that's adequate for their families. And that could be a potential red flag when you're looking at the US if we're even friendly to our soldiers as it relates to housing. So I would say across the spectrum, housing options for all is something that we need to take a critical look at this point.
So Mr. Kish, it looked like you had your light on.
I just want you to know that Mr. Kish came back from his vacation to see me. And that's a dedication because he told me when we talked the other day, I'm glad he's here, that he was going to be here. So he cut vacation. So I was sweating because I know I had to deliver since he had did that.
You have to forgive my blue jeans, but, you know.
And I don't mean to interrupt, Mr. Kish, but I have to say, and I know Mr. Curtis is going to let us know soon that he came back from a fishing trip because he has the photos to prove it. But anyway, but Mr. Kish, we'll let you have the floor for now.
Well, all right, so I'm a shipyard engineer, but I got an architecture degree late in life, and so I started from both sides. Quality of life is important to you. Okay, it's a lot more than how much money you pay them. You know, that brings about this quality of life and income productivity. Architecture starts telling you how to plan communities and take care of improving that quality of life. You know, then I was on the planning commission in Chesapeake and chairman of this. And now I'm on the housing and redevelopment authority and the land bank authority. But it starts out, you know, we get millions of dollars to help provide housing, but we only provide housing for less than 4,000 people. And I look at, we've got over a 9,000 person waiting list for help. So there's a huge number of people just in Chesapeake that really need help. But then I found out that, and it's, you don't restrict that 9,000 people don't necessarily live in Chesapeake. You know, housing is for anybody. You can't say that this house or this benefit is for one city. It's, you know, if it's, so it's a Hampton, part of this issue is definitely a Hampton Roads issue, and that's why I came here. And I think like two of you have already brought up, that it's a lot more than just the loans and the help and the, we have to figure out a way to build or have affordable housing for people, something that, you know, a family, that husband and wife work at the retail store can afford, you know, to buy a house in Hampton Roads close enough to where they work. So I guess the first thing I wanted to ask you, for the programs that you have, how big is your waiting list?
We don't have a waiting list. So if we get a new application, we will process in 7 to 10 business days that they will know whether or not they are eligible for our funds. Our issue is that as we have approved them, they're waiting to find a house. So that's the part. We give them 90 days to go out and look, but they're working with their real estate agent. They're writing contracts. Unfortunately, because of the price point, we have clients that are competing against themselves in the city. You know, if they're approved for 210 and we have 4 applicants, then 9 times out of 10, they're probably looking at some of the same homes. So it's just a waiting game. I will tell you, the best buyers, success stories have the most educated and aggressive real estate agent that is really wanting to make sure that that client is served. They know our program, they know their cities and their localities, and they're out there shaking hands and telling a story. So some of the best real estate agents say, hey, this is a first time home buyer, this is a grandma, and they've been very successful in doing that. So it's a waiting game in terms of them finding a house in their price point, but we can roll them out in 7 days. It's just when they can actually find and write a contract.
Then, reading the York County program that you participated in, one of the things that struck me there was that one of their ways of providing housing for their workforce is to put money into renovating some of the older houses that they have, because I think the idea was there that some of these older communities have smaller houses, the price point is way down. If you could bring them up to today's standards, you know, a nice central air conditioning system, things like that, you know, a good roof, they still are affordable. So, and then in your presentation, you brought up Virginia Beach is putting their money.
Right, so their home funds go toward their homeless projects as well as their rehabilitation of owner-occupied units.
So I wondered, and there are a lot of other ideas that is there any hope that we can study these different approaches in Hampton Roads and measure, produce something on their effectiveness? It's what York County's doing in Virginia Beach. Is it effective in increasing the supply of housing that's available for, below the median income? Because that seems to be the problem, that it's not out there. And,
Well, I think the other thing that our economist here always interjects in terms of when we talk about adding affordable housing, will that really do the trick? Because if you had a unit for 200,000, that $200,000 unit is affordable, but you'll have someone that could qualify for a $500,000 house want it. So typically, and I would say for my personal reasons, I am lower with my home than I can afford because I love that affordability. So it doesn't really protect unless you have a deed of trust or restriction in terms of lower income tax credits that you protect that unit. Because if not, someone savvy enough that could afford a $600,000 house will buy cash $200,000 and take that unit. So I know that we just need more housing across all spectrums and to allow people to move up as they increase their household size, increase their marital status, and allow that unit to be used for someone else coming behind it. So I hear you, unless it's tied to a specific funding source that we can protect affordability, then we will run the risk of someone grabbing that unit that could pay cash.
why can't we remotivate the whole Hampton Roads planning? Each of the cities, for their own benefit, but for all of our benefit too, to understand that people like $200,000 houses. Let's figure out a way to plan to allow $200,000 houses be built in our community. Chesapeake planning likes to say the minimum size house is going to be 2,000 square feet. Okay, so that's what a developer comes stuck with. Well, a 2,000 square foot house might be too expensive for people. A 1,700 square foot house is plenty big enough for a family. I know because I've had one for years. So, to me, it takes a whole different approach. You go, Cortuck County, I think, is doing better than us. They're building 750 square foot duplexes. Okay, granite countertops, beautiful bathrooms, lots of windows that work, and they're selling them. So how can we look at, what we're doing here? Even trailers as objective. We have, there are communities in Chesapeake that I've looked at that are living in trailers, and the people are very happy. They're good neighbors. They help each other. It costs almost nothing. And the way I found out about that is some guy wanted to sell the trailer area and build apartments in it. And you go talk to the people, well, they wouldn't have anywhere to go if you got rid of their trailer. And they're happy with where they're living. So I'm not saying create something, but it's quality of life for people. It's not necessarily about how much money you have.
Excellent comments. I want to be certain before we double up with other comments, others that first time comment.
Yeah, just more of a statement than a question, just in terms of kind of what I hear everybody talking about today is it's not just the units themselves, it's not just the affordability of the units, but we have to have an overall intersectional approach to root causes of what is
Absolutely.
encouraging these behaviors to happen in our region. So if there's a situation where we are being holistic in our approach from every industry, which I love the consortium that you were talking about, would love to hear more about that. But if we bring folks to the table to talk about what our living wage is in Hampton Roads, which I can guarantee that the majority of our industries and sectors, especially our folks that are in our workforce, right, are not making a living wage based on their household size or their accommodations. So if we approach that from, we need to all come to the table and say that we are building a better infrastructure here in Hampton Roads and not just the affordable housing, but if we can pull people up, because we're talking about a wait list in Chesapeake redevelopment of 9,000 people. That means the people in our region are poor. They are living in poverty. And you cannot just build affordable housing and say, oh, go move there. We built an affordable housing unit for you. If I still have the same job,
Absolutely.
that still pays me the same wage, and I still have my children who can't get to and from school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I think the approach has to be. It cannot just be on our housing folks, our planning folks. It has to be on all of us to make this concerted effort to say, we are going to be a little bit radical in our thinking and change the way that we've done things and say to folks that we can't just say, well, we gave them $1 increase last year. If we are being honest with ourselves, most of our raises within our organizations and our companies and sectors are still barely cutting it in terms of living wage. And so that is my opinion. Someone who's worked in nonprofit, someone who did an entire thesis on evictions in Norfolk and during COVID-19. It's got to be more than just building the units or giving people these one-time even loans, which I appreciate the work. That was not to say that I don't appreciate the work, but the money is going to run out. Grants run out. Funding stops happening from the government level. But if we can say that we have built an infrastructure strong enough here internally within the region, what happens if we don't need the grants? What happens if we don't need the loans because we have given people a stable enough economy here in the region to support themselves? So I just wanted to offer that up.
And you know that in terms of affordability with your home, with that system, as that dollar increase comes, the rent is adjusted to meet it. So unless that particular tenant makes a huge leap and come out of the system, then it will be an incremental, they're kind of baselining in the same way.
And just to that point, we have to answer the call. We are seeing inflation. We are seeing what you said, Bob, $1,800 how many years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago, and $2,700 today. Have our wages increased at that same level? We've done it backwards.
But all of their life expenses, food, gas, everything else has.
Yes.
Let's hear from the realtor.
Somebody's paying $2,700. Somebody's paying it. How are they affording it and somebody else is not? Maybe they have more education. Maybe they've done something in their life.
Your mic.
Sorry, would you mind turning on the mic?
Okay.
Thank you, sir. There we go. Sorry about that.
Someone is paying that $2,700. How is that one person paying 27 and everyone else wants to pay 1,800? Perhaps they have more education. Perhaps they lifted themselves up. Perhaps they've done something to get ahead. Good for them. Good for them. And again, that's not probably what we want to hear in this room, but that's how people get ahead in life. And it's typically going to be education. So maybe they've gone ahead and gotten some type of advanced degree that allows them to pay $2,700. From a landlord's perspective, if they've been renting it for 1,800 and they can get 27, they're going to get 27. That's just the nature of capitalism. That's where we live in. So I have no problem with people charging whatever they want to charge if they can get it. If they can get it. If they can't, they can't. And they have to drop it down to 2,600, 2,500, whatever, until they can get it. People are paying it. And how are they affording it? I don't have that answer, and maybe we should be looking into that. How are people advancing themselves?
If I may, Bob, to answer that question, through the research, they are not eating. They are not getting to and from work. They are losing their jobs.
And they're doubling
They
up.
are doubling up with, through the research, again, I've done a thesis on this. So they are getting possible one-time loans from churches, from nonprofits. They are pinching to make that work because the market is forcing them to, they have to have housing, right? So I'm going to find the money somewhere. But unfortunately, I am not paying anything else. My water is not on, my electricity bill's not on, I don't have a cell phone, I can't find groceries. So, and the book you referenced, Evicted by Matthew Desmond, has a great, because it's research-based, but also narrative as well. But he talks about in that particular case, but they also have the Princeton lab. It talks about when we have these increases in folks that are, again, living below the poverty line, not just poor, but living below the poverty line, they are having to make consistent daily sacrifices to figure out their housing situations. And again, I have worked in nonprofits. I have 4 kids now, work at YW, and that's what we're hearing from our clients as well, is that they are choosing housing for their children, but everything else kind of lacks.
And we have Bon Secours around the table with our housing consortium. And one of the bigger things is they're going without medicine, they're going without insulin, they're going without food. They're doubling up. They're living, like you said, without water and utilities. Just, some are doing well. I won't dispute that, but we would be surprised at the living conditions that are behind the closed doors of those amounts.
So maybe two comments before asking another question. The first comment is, this is a table for differing opinions and viewpoints, and that's okay. So thank you for those comments.
Absolutely.
And it's this safe place to have different viewpoints on important issues is really the strength of this group, right? Because we need different viewpoints as you determine ideas and recommendations that Sharnita and I are going to take away and say, how do we come at this issue? But as I listen to everyone who's talked already, I just want to throw a question out there. And I know the answer, but I really like everybody's perspective. I think I know the answer. Let me say this, and I want to use the word think, because what's happening out there with this housing market is really unique. Sorry, this is your expertise. It's unique out there, right? There's some different things. It is across the country, and there's some interesting things happening. But for our region, I often wonder, are we connecting the dots enough? And what I mean by that is, when we think about where we want to encourage our employment centers, Mr. Kish, are we thinking about how transportation connects to and supports that? Are we thinking about where our workforce is going to live to be able to support that? Are we thinking about what that mix is in terms of the wages related to the jobs that we're creating? We could go on and on and on, but as we look at this, I know last month John Harbin was talking with you about placemaking, right? Are we planning or thinking about the way we develop our communities intentionally enough to think about all these variables? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Does Greater Hampton Roads, does it historically have a shortage of housing in relationship to population? I'm from Surrey County, total different. We're talking apples and oranges, this greater metropolitan area. So historically, is there a shortage of housing in Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, at St. Norfolk?
Let's ask the realtors' perspective. You're right. Yes, sir. There you are. Sorry.
10, 20 years ago, you put a house on the market, 3 or 4 months later, you might have had 4 people look at it. This is the old days. Nowadays, you put it on the market, you put it on the market on Monday, and you have in the MLS listing, presenting offers Wednesday. This is even before you've even put it on the market, and you say, I'm presenting offers on Wednesday. 10, 20 years ago, no, it wasn't happening.
Okay,
So
this is my
temporarily,
point.
we're in that situation. That is changing now. We are not as bad as that, but it is changing.
That's the point that I was hoping to make. The phenomenon that we're experiencing now is a combination of things. I think most of you already know this. It's a result of COVID. It's a result of shortage of materials due to global COVID. It's a result of a war. And these factors coming together at one time when people were receiving some financial incentives during COVID have led to what I see is a phenomenon going on now. But I've been in the real estate business so long, I have seen these types of phenomenons come and go. They came in the 90s. They came in the mid 2000s. and they're here again. We just have an added factor of a combination of things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years. Now, out in Surrey County, our population is 6,800 total people in that county. We've had the same phenomenon that you have in prices of housing and rentals, but I'm beginning to see a leveling off of that as the interest rates rise. Does this board feel like the same thing will happen here, or do you feel like the impact to the supply chain is going to make this more of a permanent factor?
And any perspectives or reaction to that? Mr. Pitch?
Yes. Okay. I was on the redevelopment and housing authority before COVID, and we had this same big backlog that we have now. So that's where I first got this idea that we had to come up with a solution. Now, there are more problems now, no doubt, because of the unavailability. But we still had a lot more people that needed housing than all of our government programs could come up with helping them with. Okay? So, and that to me creates a big social problem. So we had the social problem before COVID. It's
Okay.
just worse now.
That answers the question. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, quickly here. To answer your question concerning whether or not in a holistic fashion that we are addressing the sub-issues and coming out with great outcomes, if we're leading with equity, if we're leading with sustainability and sustainable development, if we're leading with resiliency, then the answer to that question is yes. If every city around here has a chief sustainability officer, and this organization has a chief sustainability officer or resiliency officer, and they're following the sustainable development goals, looking at poverty and education and decent work, sustainability, jobs, and material use and clean energy, climate, et cetera, et cetera. If that's happening in a holistic fashion, then yes, we're on the right course, we're doing the right thing, and we have nothing to worry about. But I don't think we're doing that, I don't think every city and county, has that champion in place, to look at things from a holistic perspective in terms of sustainability and resiliency, and let alone equity and being equity centered. So until we build those foundational pieces, to each one of the 19 municipalities, the answer is no. We got a ways to go.
Waverly, I know you were.
Thank you. A couple of points I wanted to make on amazing comments, by the way, people's questions and amazing. It's very constructive. Specifically to John, what an insight as a community and a culture, how do we change people's mindsets? And I think we have two amazing examples of that with the shipyard and with NASA that's over on the Eastern Shore. Both of those companies really create their own ecosystem, if you will, through apprenticeships. And actually NASA works with a lot of the local high schools on the Eastern Shore to actually help develop their educational level and foster them right into being engineers and other positions at NASA. I mean, it's amazing. If you've ever taken the tour, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, that would be a great tour for us, because the internship and the programs that both of them have, and I actually took the Newport News tour a couple of times, and I said, so out of all the interns, like, how successful is it? They said they only have 5% that drop out. 5% that drop out. NASA works directly with the high school education program. Like, they are hand in hand to foster this through our own public school education system. And as a culture, that's what we can do with businesses throughout the area. I mean, Walmart does a lot in that regard. So this is something that we do as a culture in getting them to participate with us through our own education system and bringing our folks to the level where they can afford it on their own and they don't need your help. I
Absolutely.
mean, amazing to give people help, but what, I mean, feed a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach the man to fish, he eats for a lifetime, right? So I think that we've got some great companies right here that teach us that. The other thing that I want to bring up is some of the buildings that we're talking about putting in affordable neighborhoods. I think that's great too, because you've got to feed the market that's in front of you. If you're saying that the average house that we're going to allow as a community is a $300,000 house, whatever it is, who cares? And it's not really feeding what you have in front of you, then you're counterproductive. And I think maybe giving our locality some stats on that would be very imperative. Like, look, you're saying if a developer wants to develop, they can only develop this type of a house. The other thing is where they're going to be developing. We need to make sure we're not moving the green line. I mean, we have a big zoning problem and everybody keeps, and I know in Virginia Beach, 'cause I'm the Virginia Beach rep, right? And I spend a lot of time out in Pungo, Virginia Beach. And you know why? Because my horse is out there and I love it out there. I love the community as a whole. I love the farmlands. Uh, we're feeding ourselves here. But if we keep developing and crossing and moving that green line, that's a problem that we need to take under consideration for new development as well. We need to make sure where we're developing, that we're not moving the green line, we're not abusing eminent domain, things of that nature, I think need to be considered. As far as affordability and people being able to afford a home, we address that in some of the businesses. But what I can say is I've brought up small businesses to this group many times. Small businesses right now have a very small profit window. And right now they're struggling, just like big businesses, on getting their supplies. I actually do marketing for a local restaurant in Virginia Beach. The price of the product that they're serving at their restaurant has gone up, and they're trying to not raise the price of their product to sell it to us. Because who wants to spend, $10 more for this particular meal item because they've had to pay so much more to get it to them? The other thing is we talk about giving people a living wage. When you're talking about small businesses and giving people a living wage, I want people to make as much money as they're worth, right? Like I'm totally capitalism, rock and roll, right? But when you put a flat burden across small businesses that have this much margin of profit, and now that's being eat away at trying to get the supplies to them because that's so much higher. And now you want to pay a fast food place or a chain restaurant of sorts. You know what I'm talking about. Now you want to give them $15 an hour or $20 an hour. This isn't the type of business that can afford a $15 an hour employee. And perhaps maybe those fast food chains are your starting point for a job. They're not your permanent point. Maybe it's a permanent job when you want to own one. But again, they have such small margins that to increase the wages anymore on top of their burden that they have right now, city fees, we literally have this particular restaurant that I represent, and I will not mention their name, was audited by the city of Virginia Beach to see if they were paying enough in taxes. And they had worked with some nonprofits, and because they have a nonprofit status, they didn't charge them a tax because they're entitled to that when they use them for a nonpartisan or a nonprofit purpose. And they literally had to go through that audit process. Okay, they have the right to audit them, but think about the manpowers, the accounting that you have to bring to the table and pay these people to do this. This is also, when they have to go through these audits, it's not like an hour conversation. It's more fees and time that you're taking away from that margin of profit. I hope I made my point.
No, thank you very much. I didn't mean to interrupt, but as we wind down, just because we do have at least one more item to get to, I can offer you an option for the third one. But I would like to go around the room for those that haven't had a chance for anything, could we start, Mr. Curtis, any thoughts to add to the conversation? Cecil, I'm sorry. Cecil Jenkins, I'm sorry.
I came here already to talk about transportation.
Cecil.
And the housing conversation broke out.
You know,
I tricked you.
yeah, but this has been very eye-opening, very informative.
And I apologize for the name mix-up, sir. Mr. Bowie, anything you wanted to add? Going around, I'm sorry, Ms. Howard.
I just want to say,
I understand, I understand. Mr. McFarland, anything to add? Anthony? Going around, anybody else who hasn't had an opportunity? Ms. Anderson, anything to add to the conversation today?
As I'm sitting here listening, I'm really trying to comprehend and to understand actually what's going on. So I'm hearing some things about the planning commission allowing certain things to happen. And so I thought to myself, well, why are they allowing builders to come in to build such expensive dwellings, knowing the pay average within their city? Okay, if they're the average pay is at a certain level, and if you build certain dwellings that's way out of that pay level, why is that being allowed?
So one of the challenges that you'll get into at a local level is your ability to deny a development plan is limited to the zoning regulations and development regulations. So that if a plan comes in and you meet lot size and you meet setbacks, you make impervious coverage or area ratio requirements, and it's the appropriate use. After you approve it, you can't control the private market of what that property sells.
Yeah.
And if you get $800,000 and you're thinking you have a person in the street for 300, fine, we'll find out what happens. Because on the market, see what happens. If they sell, the builder's happy. If they don't sell, they'll drop the price. Or they'll build something different. They'll build something to whatever you can get the profit. What the city can do, the biggest thing the city can do is lot size. Instead of 9,330 or 6,000, 3,000 square foot lot size. That's going to be in a smaller property, that's going to be in a smaller price. So lot size is the biggest thing, in my mind.
In density.
That they can,
So lot size, building height, density, not only smaller units, less infrastructure for the developer to build, less financing, upfront costs, other things you could talk more about, but that gives more opportunity than a previous example that was given that, okay, a minimum of 3,000 square foot lot or minimum lot size is 15,000 square feet. You're just not going to get that as more options for affordability. That's a great question.
And my next slide was to meet the team. And all of this wonderful work you see is done by two people. And Deidre had a comment, so I wanted to recognize my housing specialist. She is the one who actually works one-on-one with the actual buyers. She's working with the real estate agents and lenders, and she does real estate and agent and lender training. So she had a comment, and I wanted to let her have that right.
Yeah, I listening to everyone, it's been amazing. I think for me, the takeaway, if you all could just take one thing away from this, is everything, right? Everything this young lady said, everything you've said, everything you've said. It's when Shanita says affordable housing for all or adequate housing for all, we want those people that can afford that $2,800 here. But we also want those people who can't. We want those kids that go to school and be engineers and get those jobs at NASA. But what about the janitor? Where's he going to be? So I think the biggest takeaway is everything that everyone has said around the table is relevant. and it matters. And that's what we need in each and every jurisdiction, is to have that mix of people. And we have to make sure that our jurisdiction is doing the work, that no one lane of person takes over the jurisdiction. So we have to have that mixed use, mix of people to come up with a great regional plan. It's got to be that way, and each jurisdiction has to be on board. But I thank everyone for all of their comments. I mean, it just brings back what we do every day.
Absolutely. So we appreciate your spirited conversation. We don't know what this is going to look like. We're just starting these conversations. We have a lot of other focus groups and conversations. So I have some business cards. I also have some flyers of the work that we do in each locality that I could send you all if you all want that. Our contact information is up here. If you need to grab me for any, or Deidre, please do so. But I want to come back. I know this is a lot of information for one time. So if there's any one particular area that you all would like to really deep dive into, I'm more than willing to come back around the table with you all.
So Shanita, what I'd like to do is, maybe a little bit of homework. So based on, and first off, thank you. What a great conversation. So now what I'd like your help on is, based on what you heard today, if you could, within the next 2 weeks, think about it a little bit. And I'm going to send out an email to you. I'd like to ask you for one idea for how we might move forward at a regional level. What we're really trying to put our minds around is, what's the role of the PDC, right? How do we set the table as a region? Is it starting a conversation? Is it convening and connecting? Really interested in what you have to say about that. And then I will collect that information and share it with Sharnita and Deidre. So if you could help us with that, that sincerely would be incredibly helpful for us, because there's a lot of perspective. Deidre, I can't, you nailed it. that perspective, but we could really use your help on that. So if I would follow up with an email, I would really appreciate it if you could provide us some thought on that. Okay, well, excellent. So John, how would you like to follow that one up? Yes, and transportation. So I think you all know John Mahaley. John is a principal in our transportation planning division. John's division, though, deals with the dollars that we have available to invest in transportation projects that come to our regional transportation planning organization. And he's going to talk with you a little bit about a process that he and his team are involved with at the moment. So, John?
All right, so I don't know if any of you are familiar with Monty Python. And one of the things that they used to say is, and now for something completely different. All right, so we're talking here this afternoon about going after transportation infrastructure dollars within a couple of federal programs. And the name for that is, it's a mouthful, the HRTPO 2022 CMAC and RSTP project selection process. Right, so there's some acronyms in there and it's very confusing. I'll explain it quickly. So I will be brief this afternoon, but I'd be happy to answer all the questions you may have, obviously. So for the 22 process, we have two programs that the HRTPO is tasked with selecting projects and also for approving funding allocations. So the first one is, it's called the congestion mitigation, not management, and air quality, which is CMAC and Regional Surface Transportation Program. So the process is annual. Every year we have money that we have to approve allocations for in new projects. Now, for this particular round, we have about $35 million in RSTP funding. And for CMAC, we have about $11 million. So that's a nice chunk of money. And so we have projects that are previously approved that sometimes we have some extra money that we apply to as well. So the first program here is the CMAC program. And it provides federal funds primarily to try to improve our air quality. Now I'm going to throw some science at you, so I don't want to lose you right away. The two main things that we're trying to decrease in our air is NOx, which is nitrogen oxides, and VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Now that sounds sciencey, but this is in the air, and this program tries to reduce that for CMAQ, okay? And then the next program here is the RSTP, and it's federal funding for a whole big wide variety of projects. And at the end of this presentation, I'll have Dimitri pull up our CMAQ and RSTP webpage where there's a lot of information there. And if you're not familiar with this or the program, I think it's a great thing to inform yourselves about. So the process itself, I've highlighted the first box here, and I kind of want to draw your attention to this. This is a great opportunity for the public to really get involved and provide your input on projects that you think could work or could happen. You see an infrastructure, transportation infrastructure problem in your neighborhood, in your community. This is your opportunity to get your voice out there. So I strongly encourage you, and not just you, and to share this with other folks that you may be involved with, to submit project ideas. And they will be considered for CMAQ and RSTP funding. The next phase of the operation here is all the localities and the agencies in the region. They'll submit the applications to us. We'll score these projects, we evaluate them. It's a bit of a process. And then we start going through our committee process. You'll see the first one here listed in the light blue box, the TPS. What the heck's a TPS, okay? Sorry, I gotta refer to this movie Office Space. And if anyone's familiar with that movie, one of the main things that the boss keeps talking about is the TPS report. And so anyway, if you haven't seen it, Google it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You get a really good laugh out of that. But anyway, it's the Transportation Programming Subcommittee. And so this is where we get into the weeds on these projects and on evaluating them and make some recommendations, which goes to our technical committee, the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee. They're going to review the TPS recommendations, and then this goes to the HRTPO board. And then the board will decide which projects get funding and which ones are selected. And then that gets approved. And the process here is for fiscal year 2029 monies. So we plan this stuff out. We're planners, but this is more of a long-term plan. This is for 2029 funding. So these projects take some time to get moving and to get developed to where they're ready to be built. So the form, it's a little small here, sorry about that, but this is the form that's online, and I'll show you where that is. But it's pretty simple, a pretty simple form. So all of your project ideas you send to me, I will distribute those to any of the localities or the agencies, and they will be considered for a potential CMAQ RSTP application. Now, we have a deadline here of next week. Don't hear me out. So don't get too upset about that. You can submit ideas all year long. This is just to try to catch for this ongoing process. And if you are working on something, you need some more time, I can give you an extra week or so, because we have to get that information to the localities and the agencies so they can kind of take a look at that. So, but if it's something that you really want to develop and work on a lot more, it's fine if it doesn't make it for this round. Still send it to me. We will make sure that these things get proper consideration. And so the form itself is pretty straightforward. Put your name, rank, serial number. But say you have a project that you want to improve a street from Elm Street to Maple Street, put those two endpoints in there. And as much information as you can put into the form as possible. If you have a map or you want to draw a picture, you have some data, put all you know or all you can in here. If you don't have all that background information, that's fine. This city or county, they're gonna have a lot of that information to be able to help you out with that. So this is just your opportunity to really get your voice out there. And that's the main reason I came here today was to convey that information, that message to you. You can ask a question anytime you want to.
I'll be quick.
Sure.
You mentioned some of the pollutants, and those are
are criteria.
They're the primary ones. There are some
Right.
others that they look at. too,
Yeah, because I'm, come off the top of my mind, I would be thinking about PM2, 2.5, PM10, diesel particulates. If we're looking around the ports, we're
There's
looking at
a
black
whole
carbon.
litany and a whole range of
Oh,
those.
we
And,
can,
and for
okay.
today's purposes,
Okay.
I looked at the major two that we're seeking to reduce. We're talking about pounds and tons in the atmosphere.
Gotcha.
But
gotcha.
there, yes, you're absolutely correct. There are many, many more, and those are considered as well.
And the level of funding that we're talking about per project.
There's no maximum,
Oh, wow.
although it probably won't get funded because part of our scoring technique considers the cost versus how many pollutants are going to be pulled out of the atmosphere. So it's a very technical and data-driven process for CMAQ. Now for RSTP, a little more flexible there. You can put in a project for $100 million,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and we've had $100 million projects funded.
And is this monitoring or mitigation?
No, this here, so we're in attainment here in Hampton Roads. We get this money anyway because there are other places in the state or the Commonwealth that aren't in that level or aren't in that position. So these monies get sub-allocated from the federal government, and we benefit by doing that. But what we want to do is maintain the status we have.
Right.
We don't want to lose sight of this attainment we received. We want to make sure we stay in that lane.
Yeah, exactly. Quickly. And can this be a monitoring project where we go out and take air samples and stuff like that, or a mitigation project where
It has to be for CMAQ. It's mitigation. Like
mitigation.
now you can do a study
A study.
under RSTP if you wanted to.
Gotcha.
Okay. But for CMAQ, it has to have that benefit of pulling those pollutants out of the air.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Those are some really great questions. I appreciate it. I never get questions, so I'm so excited. I have to do it myself. So that date up there is the deadline.
John, I think Ms. Howard was feeling sorry for you, so she has another question.
Thank you so much, Don. I so appreciate that.
Oh, good. I was wondering those particulates that you want to get out of the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
What's producing them?
What's producing them? Many things.
Okay.
Primarily truck exhaust.
Okay,
So
well-
we have some programs, for electrification of truck fleets, such as we have at the fleet. The Green Operator Program. We also have the barge service that receives CMAQ monies. So it's coming from a lot of places. It's
Can we get a
auto
list?
industry. There are quite a few ways that it'll be contributed to the air.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not all in transportation.
It is not all in transportation, no.
Okay, can we get a list?
A list?
Yeah, a list of where it's coming from.
Well, I tell you what, I can get you a top 10 list, which, I mean, it can be, there'd be quite a list there. So different ways that our environment is polluted, there's quite a few, but I've mentioned
So do you have
the
the
top
names
three.
of those things? Because I'll never remember them and I can look them up.
For,
The particulates that you were
oh,
talking
the
about, yeah. do you
nitrogen
have them like
oxides,
that?
the
Yeah,
NOx.
I'm never going to remember that.
No, and I barely
have
do
them
myself,
written down.
trust me. So, but anyhow, if you'd like to get a list of some of the major contributors, I can absolutely get that to you. I think we have your email. All right. So just rounding out our selection process here, the applications are due September 1st. And then by the end of November of this year, our staff will complete all of the scoring and evaluation. It's very intense. There's a lot that goes into this. We look at a lot of data, and I think our staff does a pretty good job of getting some good numbers on those. And then, there's the TPS report, committee coming up in December. And then by January, we'll have the T-TEC and the board weigh in on the recommendations. So the last item here. So you're encouraged to review the project idea form I had up on the screen and click this website here. And you submit those ideas to me by next week, but you can have more time on that and you can really submit it anytime. And Dimitri, if you could click on the website, I just want to really quickly go through this. I just want to scroll down a little bit. So this will take you to this webpage here with our CMAC and RSTP. It gives you the guide. And I mentioned earlier, all the different types of projects that you can apply for. And you might want to take a look in this guide because it'll list out all the RSTP project types and all the CMAC project types. If you keep scrolling down, these are our actual application documents. You don't need to refer to that. The schedule, which I've posted, is here. And then we also have these CMAC and RSTP tracking tables. They're pretty interesting. These tables go back to the early 90s. Every CMAC and RSTP dollar that was spent in this region is all there. Everything, every project that's been built since the early 90s is all listed there. You go ahead and scroll down a little bit more, Dimitri. There's my contact information again, and then scroll down to the very end here, and that's the 2020 report, which will now be replaced by the 2021 calendar year report here this fall as we're putting the finishing touches on that. And all this information, the scoring sheets and all that, you can get real deep into the woods here if you want to. I wanted to give you all an opportunity to take a look at that, and some of these questions that you've asked can be answered there as well. So that's all I have. I can take any questions you want. Thanks, Dimitri.
Yes, Waverly?
Thank you. At one of our meetings here, you talked about the, I guess like the bike trail or the natural trail, the Virginia Trail, whatever we were going to call it.
Extension of the Virginia Capitol Trail.
Yeah, and it was going to go long places, all over the place. That's great. Is that a part of your project?
So that is,
You will not be answering this.
I was going to go with that.
Bob will answer
Go ahead,
John. Bob, please go ahead. I might be going a different direction. So.
No, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, so you were talking about the active transportation projects, bicycle, pedestrian trails, probably.
And equestrian.
The
equestrian.
Just
saying.
Primarily equestrian. And those types of projects can absolutely be funded with RSTP dollars, okay? For those types of projects, there's another funding source that we have some purview over. It's called the TA set aside, and others refer to as TAP funding. But this is a biennial process, so every 2 years we sit down and do the same thing with that funding source. It's another federal funding source. Localities have to come up with about a 20% match on that. But the primary type of project that typically gets funded there is rail trails and such.
Okay, so that is a part of what you can do.
But yes, you could absolutely come up with an RSTP
Is it
project.
in your top 10 list of funding, or is there other stuff ahead
Trails
of the
tend
line?
to do well.
I
Not
would
for
think.
CMAC because trails not.
But I
fully
just
locked
wanted
yet.
to, I just was honestly just trying to find out what's in the lineup, like what we're talking about doing now. I just don't want us to come back 3 months in another 3 months meeting or 6 months or whatever, and we didn't get the top lineup of what you're going to be funding and going forward with right now. And that wouldn't hurt my feelings if that was in that lineup. I'm just saying.
So what John is asking for today is due, submissions are due by September the 1st. That process he outlined will lead them through the committees, and then our board will make that decision in January, what the projects are that they're going to think about funding with these programs. Now, the nice part about that is you'll meet in October, then December. John and I could have a touch point to you in December to say, these are the ones that look like the top tier. And then you'd have a chance to comment on that before the board takes action in January.
We'll have the entire list of every project that was submitted.
Okay.
Everything will be scored and categorized by the different
Perfect.
types.
If you could put that on our agenda item, I mean, if
Sure.
no one objects, so that by October, we have it as an agenda item and we kind of know what they're doing.
And we could also do another touch point on our trail project.
Perfect. That, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, if we could, I do have a couple more things to discuss. I do want to be cognizant of time. But I don't, anything more for John?
Underserved, under-resourced communities, the facts show that they're clearly disproportionately impacted by air pollution sources. How will you be applying an equity and environmental justice lens to your selection?
That is a part of our RSTP project selection process. It is the same tool that we use for a long-range transportation plan, and it does have those filters in it.
Bob, you were at our meeting recently and talking about HRT and what they were using regional transportation taxes for, right? And you were going to set up a meeting with us with HRT. So, I mean, maybe that was something we could bring here. Is that something that would be used for money in this project?
So
In-
it's a
in
great
this category?
It's a great question. Probably not in this category, with the exception, you could get some bus stop type of applications, maybe some bus route assistance, but predominantly that's the regional fund. And we have our Transportation Advisory Panel meeting on the 31st of this month, and then I do think that's something we could have here in October.
Okay.
And that HRT briefing, because it's another good touch point on where they're at with advancing the regional transit backbone. So we could pull that together. That would tie in nicely with the trail too. Okay. Okay, thank you, John.
You're welcome.
This next item, I'm really going to short circuit, but there are a couple things that I just feel are really timely and important for you all to beg your forgiveness. I'm going to move very quickly here. But I want to give you an update on a couple of things that are moving at a fairly quick speed related to transportation in particular. And they're all going to be part of our conversation on creating the regional legislative agenda for the Hampton Roads region. For the past 6 years, we have really tried and have in fact adopted regional legislative agendas that have been very specific and action oriented at both the TPO and the PDC boards. And we've used that to represent our region before the General Assembly and before our federal delegation. We have set up a regional legislative committee. These are some of the names on that regional legislative committee. And we're going to be meeting over the next couple of months leading up to the adoption of our regional legislative agenda, hopefully in October, that we have until November to add items to it. And that allows us to begin advocating and informing our General Assembly delegation of what our asks are going to be for the coming year. We're pretty lean. You're looking at the region's legislative liaison, so we don't have full-time legislative liaison for the region, but we do our best to work with our Hampton Roads Caucus members and our federal delegation. And in fact, we were before them just this morning with Ms. McClellan and with Mayor Tuck to start talking about things that are important to our region. What we do at a regional level is intended to be complementary, but not in conflict with local priorities. We're short in staff. We have to have a small list. That list has to be endorsed by all 17 local governments unanimously. It's better that we go in with 2 to 3 things that we can get done than go in with a long list of things, as many of you who work at the General Assembly know. So last year, here's some of our successes. Last year, and I'm going to talk more about this in a second, we did get funding for the I-64 gap. I'm excited. I'm going to give you more detail on that in a minute, but we're in a good place there. We advocated for the 3rd edition of the 3rd passenger rail train to Norfolk, which we just celebrated. We successfully were able to bring back the 2nd passenger rail train to Newport News, which was also part of that celebration. We saw a pretty significant increase in funding for economic development site readiness. We were excited about some increased flexibility. We had 2 bills introduced by General Assembly members that increased flexibility for broadband funding. That's really helping us now as we build out this regional fiber network in the Hampton Roads region, and really generated a lot of discussion about coastal resiliency and the formation of a Commonwealth Flood Board at the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm going to talk about ERC tolls in a bit, but one of the things we are excited about was through the TPO, we set up an ERC task force. We successfully increased the low-income toll relief program for low-income residents. That was announced last December. Look for another announcement to come this fall. If things keep working the way they are, we're really hoping we're going to see more progress on that in the coming months. And some of our emergency management funding, we were able to maintain, and that's another meeting that we'll do with you and talk about how important that funding is to us. But I'd like to talk with you a little bit about the I-64 gap. So let's stop a second. So we're all talking the same language. So our region, through our local regional gas tax and local sales and use tax, has, through HRTAC, has invested over $311 million to widen Interstate 64 from Jefferson on the peninsula to the interchange just past Williamsburg, moving westward. What that leaves is a 29, and as you know, you see that we go 3 lanes in each direction with improved berms. I know that we're all still conditioned when you hit Jefferson, you get on the brakes. And it's like, no, you can keep on going now, right? That's pretty good selling. But as you know, you get west of Williamsburg and now it comes back down 2 lanes in each direction. And you all know what happens, right? It's one incident. You don't have berms for people to safely move over on. And one incident really impacts the reliability. That goes that way for 29 miles to what we call the Bottoms Bridge intersection, which is just this side of 295. Okay, so where we stand, we have the 29-mile gap from exit 234 to exit 205. Only 9 of those miles are in the Hampton Roads region. Okay. So we have worked really hard on this with business partners, with our General Assembly. Here's what happened this year. And I got to tell you, we are in such a better place than we were a year ago at this time. So first off, and please, I have to stress this, and we thanked him this morning. If you see Delegate Barry Knight, please thank him. Delegate Knight led the way. And in the state budget, over the next 2 years, the budget conferees under Delegate Knight's leadership allocated $450 million towards the I-64 gap. So let me back up a second and tell you that on March the 15th, when they went into budget deliberations, the Senate side had $190 million proposed on the gap. The House side had $50 million proposed in the gap. I'm going to be honest, I was hoping for something in the middle in that $100 million range, and Delegate Knight's leadership delivered this for our region. This is one of the first time general funds have come out of the state budget for highway improvement, and the first time I know for this region. It was an enormous, enormous victory for this region. You can't thank Delegate Knight enough. So year one, $300 million. If revenues track as they are, another $150 million in year 2 for a total of $450. Now you see, we're starting at a total cost of $750. That's a sizable chunk right out of it, right? We then collaborated with the state. We submitted a federal funding application to them for $150 million. Good news is, good and bad news, Pavitra will tell you that last Friday at noon, we heard from the federal government. They wanted more information on our grant application. That's never a bad thing. We got that at noon on Friday, and they gave us until noon on Monday. Pavitra and John Mahaley got all that pulled together and uploaded it Sunday night. So we made the submission deadline. We're in play for that $150 million. That would get us to $600. And our friends up in Richmond, recognizing that we've already contributed $311 million, their regional transportation authorities offered $100 million. So we're at $700 million. We're hoping that cost value engineering can get us down a little from 750, but we're going to find the money, right? That 50 million is not going to stop us. So we're really hopeful. I can tell you that Secretary Shep Miller has been an incredible leader on this. It is great to have a Secretary of Transportation from the Hampton Roads region. He is leading the charge on this. He would love to go to bid this winter on this project. If this funding all comes into play, you could see this built. HRBT is going to open in 2026. You could see this open around 2027 to 2028. And So that's just really, really exciting news the big thing I will say to you is if you see Delegate Knight, please thank him. If you see Secretary Miller, please thank them. Continue to support this effort forward. So this is exciting news. Here's some of the things that we're looking at for legislative priorities this year. We got to stay on the full funding for the I-64 gap, the Elizabeth River Crossings Toll Agreement. We're going to be bringing together another meeting of our ERC task force in September, working with the mayors, not only Mayor Glover, but all of the mayors in Hampton Roads as we continue to look at ways to mitigate the impact of those tolls on our residents. And we now have 5 passenger service trains to Hampton Roads. We now got to improve that reliability in terms of time, frequency, taking the train to Richmond, Zakia next year, some year when we go up there for General Assembly, we're going to make the train more as competitive as the automobile, hopefully. But seriously, that connection, not only to Richmond, but up to DC for our military will be important as well. So we really are going to be advocating there. We're going to expect to have a number of items we'll be discussing around coastal resiliency. It includes dedicated state and federal funding for coastal resiliency projects. Some of these flood mitigation projects are in the billions upon billions of dollars. They are just not things that these cities can handle, that your residents, that your neighbors can handle to pay for, right? We know that the Port of Virginia benefits the entire Commonwealth of Virginia and the East Coast of our country. Our military that we're so proud of is a critical federal asset. We're really asking the state and the federal government to lean in to help us with these flood mitigation projects. Yes, Ms. Howard.
Could we get a briefing on what these projects are?
Absolutely. We
I
have
mean, before,
absolutely. We could we have 3 localities that have really led on that. And Pavitra, if you can make a note, that would be a great briefing to bring to you. The other thing I want to bring to your attention, Jefferson Laboratory. Okay. So if we go back a couple of years, Jefferson Lab in Newport News was in a federal competition for something called an ion collider. And John Mahaley, yeah, that's right up there with some of those other things that are complicated. Long story short, we lost that to Long Island. Now we're in a new competition. The president's proposed budget indicates that there is going to be a super advanced data processing facility, what's called the supercomputer, somewhere on the East Coast. This is the largest analytic system available for scientists to run the largest data sets and do analytics. Jefferson Lab is in competition. Now, here's a couple of things. First off, we were really upset about losing the ion collider to Long Island. But what we found out is that Jeff Lab has a $400 million contractor doing work for that ion collider in Long Island. So they're still getting money, contract money there. But this supercomputer could generate 1,000 to 2,000 jobs at Jefferson Laboratory. HRPDC at the last meeting took unanimous support on this to weigh in at the time when the timing's right. We're waiting for the federal request for proposal, and we want to be positioned to really stand united as a region on Jeff Lab. So that's one that I wanted to bring to your attention. We're going to continue to support offshore wind at the General Assembly. I already talked about economic development site readiness. Some of you may be aware that we're looking at public safety as a region. We're convening mayoral roundtables in this room. I'll be with you in 1 second. And what we've done is we're going to be holding our 3rd meeting on that in September. And what we're trying to do is learn from one another and understand things that our localities can do to address this issue. We have a CAO committee that's working on legislative asks that might help us with public safety. So Waverly, my apologies, but I wanted to get that in, and you have a question.
Yeah, I do. And thank you. I just wanted you to
Yes.
put me in the rotation. That's all I meant
Very
by
good.
that.
And then last but certainly not least, the housing conversation. Shanita talked with you about bills that we monitored last year. There's certainly going to be a number of them this year. We're going to be looking at that closely and trying to determine where we best weigh in. So I'm sorry for moving so quickly. These are some of the things being thought about. You have opportunity for input today. And we're going to put this on the agenda for October so you can weigh in again, because our board will be looking for approval in October. We'll be through some committees and can give you some more concrete ideas. But the good news is we are seeing movement on some of these things that offer some great potential for us. So why don't I pause there? And yes, Waverly.
I just, in your lineup for your legislative priorities, my only major concern here is the support of offshore wind.
Okay.
We know the environmental impact that doing those constructions in the ocean, we know that, I mean, I don't need to bring those studies to you. You already know them. The other thing is that they know they are not really producing enough energy. I mean, how much wind does it take to turn on a light bulb is my point. It's not the means do not outweigh the cost on that. And I'm just concerned of the environmental impact from offshore windmills. And I'm also concerned about good money going after bad when it's not really producing the energy efficiency that we really need.
So I would really like to come in and give you a counter viewpoint on some of those. I think it'd be a great conversation. I think where we're really trying to position ourselves as a region is, first off, we have an energy challenge right now, a deficit in our region. But one of the things that is exciting for us is that with the offshore wind fields off the coast of North Carolina, those being envisioned off the coast of Virginia and then to our northeast, our harbor and bay is the only one without a vertical obstruction, which means we think we can be that hub to support the logistics and supply chain for offshore wind. And we think that means jobs for our region. But the way I would love to be able to come back when we have more time and go through that and have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that would be very appropriate. And again, I'm just talking about the amount that's going to actually be produced from what we're doing here and the actual cost that it's going to cost this region to put that in. Is it really going to be cost effective?
And we can bring forward that in.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Yes, sir.
Yeah, quickly. The I-64 29-mile gap expansion, does it have to translate into a loss of 29 miles of trees and brush and habitat for animals as well? Anyway, just observation.
Yeah, that median's received a lot of study, and there's a number of challenges in that median that, you know, when you provide an environment that attracts deer and other things and the safety issues, but there always is that balance. So my heart's with you. I understand what you're saying, and I think that context-sensitive design will need to be looked at. Some places we do okay with that, and others we don't. So I think you raise a good point. But hopefully we can start to dispel that myth that we're a cul-de-sac someday, right? If we can get I-64 and get that moving. So, okay. Any other questions for me on this particular item? I think what that will do then is set us up for our next meeting in October. I would love to put for agenda topics as well. Why don't I pause and see if anybody else has anything for the good of the order today? You're going to see that we continue to have localities identify and appoint CAC members. First off, I didn't do this at the beginning, but I need to pause and thank everybody. It's August, and the fact that you're able to come in here and willing, I realize this is sacrifice to give us 2 hours of time to learn about and discuss regional issues. So I just want you to know we really appreciate that and don't take that lightly. So thank you. But you're going to see our CAC continue to grow and We're going to have some localities here who have never been here before, so we're really excited about it. So, okay, well, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great August. It's going to start getting cooler, but we'll see you in October, and some of you sooner.